She darkened to the ominous descent, unwilling, and her once so human waves sent forth a cry not meant for living ears. And Ruru chilled, but terrible, strong love was like a fiery finger in his breast, pointing him on. So he through horror went conducted by inexorable sound, for monstrous voices to his ear were close, and bodiless terrors with their dimness seized him in an obscurity phantasmal. Thus, with agony of soul, to the grey waste he came, glad of the pain of passage over, as men who through the storms of anguish strive into a binding, tranquil dreariness, and draw sad breath assured. To the grey waste, hopeless Patala, the immutable country, where neither sun nor rain arrives, nor happy labour of the human plough fruitlessly turns the soil, but in vague sands and indeterminable strange rocks and caverns that into silent blackness huge recede, dwell the great serpent and his hosts, writhed forms sinuous, abhorred through many horrible leagues, coiling in a half-darkness. Shapes he saw, and heard the hiss, and knew the lambent light loathsome, but past, compelling his strong soul. At last, through those 6 tired, hopeless worlds, too hopeless far for grief, pale he arrived into a nether air by anguish moved, and heard before him cries that pierced the heart, human, not to be born, and issued shaken by the great river accursed. Maddened it ran, anguished, importunate, and in its waves the drifting ghosts their agony endured. There Ruru saw pale faces float of kings and grandiose victors, and revered high priests and famous women. Now rose from the wave a golden shuddering arm, and now a face, torn piteous sides were seen, and breasts that quailed. Over them moaned the penal waters on, and had no joy of their fierce cruelty. Then Ruru, his young cheeks with pity wan, half moaned, O miserable race of men, with violent and passionate souls, you come foredoomed upon the earth, and live brief days in fear and anguish, catching at stray beams of sunlight, little fragrances of flowers. Then from your spacious earth in a great horror descend into this night, and here too soon must expiate your few inadequate joys. O bargain hard, death helps us not. He leads alarmed, all shivering from his chill embrace, the naked spirit here. O my sweet flower, art thou too whelmed in this fierce wailing flood? Ah me! But I will haste and deeply plunge into its hopeless pools, and either bring thy old warm beauty back beneath the stars, or find thee out and clasp thy tortured bosom, and kiss thy sweet wrung lips, and hush thy cries. Love shall draw half thy pain into my limbs. Then we shall triumph, glad of agony. He ceased, and one replied close by his ear, O thou, who troublest with thy living eyes established death, pass on. She whom thou seekest rolls not in the accursed tide. For late I saw her mid those pale inhabitants whom bodily anguish visits not, but thoughts sorrowful and dumb memories absolve, and martyrdom of scourged hearts quivering. He turned and saw astride the dolorous flood a mighty bridge paved with mosaic fire, all restless and a woman clothed in flame, with hands calamitous that held a sword, stood of the waking passage sentinel. Magnificent and dire her burning face. "Pass on," she said once more, "O Bhrigu's son. The flower protects thee from my hands." She stretched one arm towards him, and with violence majestic, over the horrid arch compelled, unhurt, though shaking from her touch, alone he stood upon an inner bank with strange, black, dreary mosses covered, and perceived a dim and level plain without one flower. Over it paced a multitude immense, with gentle faces occupied by pain. Strong men were there, and grieving mothers, girls with early beauty with their limbs, and young sad children of their childlike faces robbed. Naked they paced, with falling hair, and gaze drooping upon their bosom, weak as flowers that die for want of rain, unmurmuring. Always a silence was upon the place. But Ruru came upon them. Suddenly, one felt him there and looked, and as a wind moves over a still field of patient corn, and the ears stir and shudder and look up and bend innumerably flowing, so all those dumb spirits stirred, and through them passed one shuddering motion of raised faces. Then they streamed towards him without sound, and caught with desperate hands his robe, or touched his hair, or strove to feel upon them living breath. Pale girls and quiet children came and knelt, and with large sorrowful eyes into his looked. Yet with their silent passion the cold hush moved not. But Ruru's human heart half burst with burden of so many sorrows. Tears welled from him. He with anguish understood that terrible and wordless sympathy of dead souls for the living. Then he turned his eyes and scanned their lovely faces strange for that one face, and found it not. He paled and spoke vain words into the listless air. O spirits once joyous, miserable race, happier if the old gladness were forgot. My soul yearns with your sorrow. Yet reveal if dwell my love in your sad nation lost. Well may you know her, O one beautiful spirits, but she most beautiful of all that died, by sweetness recognizable. Her name the sunshine knew. Speaking, his tears made way, a vague and empty mourning in their eyes. He murmured low, "Ah, folly! Were she here, would she not first have felt me? First have raised her lids and run to me, leaned back her face of silent sorrow on my breast, and looked with the old altered eyes into my own, and striven to make my anguish understand. O joy, had she been here, for though her lips of their old excellent music quite were robbed, yet her dumb passion would have spoken to me. We should have understood each other, and walked silently, hand in hand, almost content," he said, and passed through those untimely dead. Speechless they followed him, with clinging eyes. Then to a solemn building weird he came, with grave colossal pillars round. One dome roofed the whole brooding edifice, like cloud, and at the door strange shapes were pacing armed. Then, from their fear, the sweet and mournful dead drew back, returning to their wordless grief. But Ruru to the perilous doorway strode, and those disastrous shapes upon him raised their bows and aimed, but he held out love's flower, and with stern faces checked, they let him pass. He entered and beheld the silent hall, dim and unbounded, moving then like one who up a dismal stair seeks ever light, attained a dais brilliant, doubtfully with flaming pediment, and round it coiled Python and Naga monstrous, Jaratkaru, Takshak and Vasuki himself. Immense, magic Karkatuka, all flecked with fire, and many other prone destroying shapes coiled. On the wondrous dais rose a throne, and he, its pedestal, whose lotus hood with ominous beauty crowns his horrible sleek folds, great Mahapadma. High displayed, he bears the throne of death. There sat, supreme, with those compassionate and lethal eyes, who many names, who many natures holds, Yama, the strong, pure Hades, sad and subtle, Dharma, who keeps the laws of old untouched, Kritanta, who ends all things, and at last himself shall end. On either side of him, the four-eyed dogs mysterious rested, prone, watchful, with huge heads on their paws advanced, and emanations of the Godhead dim moved near him, shadowy or serpentine, vast time and cold irreparable death. Then Ruru came and bowed before the throne, and swaying, all those figures stirred as shapes upon a tapestry moved by the wind. And the sad voice was heard. What breathing man bows at the throne of Hades? By what force spiritual or communicated troubles his living beauty, the dead grace of hell? And one replied, who seemed a neighboring voice, he has the blood of gods and titans old. And Apsara, his mother, liquid-orbed, bore to the youthful Chavan's strong embrace this passionate face of earth with Eden touched. Chavan was Brigu's child, Puloma bore, the Titaness. Brigu, great Brahma's son. Love gave the flower that helps by anguish. Therefore he chilled not with the breath of Hades, nor the cry of the infernal stream made stone. But at the name of love, all hell was moved. Death's throne half faded into twilight. Hissed the phantom serpentine as if in pain, and the dogs raised their dreadful heads. Then spoke Yama. And what needs love in this pale realm? The warm, great love? All worlds his breath confounds, mars solemn order and old steadfastness. But not in hell his legates come and go. His vernal jurisdiction to bear hell extends not. This last world resists his power, youthful, anarchic. Here will he enlarge tumult and wanton joys? The voice replied, Menaka, momentary on the earth, heaven's Apsara by the fleeting hours beguiled, played in the happy hidden glens. There, bowed to yoke of swift terrestrial joys, she bore, immortal, to that fair Gandharva king, a mortal blossom of delight. That bloom, young Ruru found and plucked. But her too soon thy fatal hooded snake on earth surprised, and he through gloom now travels, armed by love. But then all Hades swaying towards him cried, O mortal, O misled, but sacrifice is stronger, nor may law of hell or heaven its fierce effectual action supersede. Thy dead I yield, yet thou bethink thee, mortal, not as a tedious evil, nor to be lightly rejected, gave the gods old age, but tranquil, but august, but making easy the steep ascent to God. Therefore must time still batter down the glory and form of youth and animal magnificent strong ease to warn the earthward man that he is spirit dallying with transience, nor by death he ends, nor to the dumb warm mother's arms is bound, but called, unborn, into the unborn skies. For body fades with increasing soul, and wideness of its limit, grown intolerant, replaces life's impetuous joys by peace. Youth, manhood, ripeness, age, 4 seasons twixt its return, and pale departing life describes. O mortal, youth that forward bends midst hopes, delights, and dreamings. Manhood deepens to passions, toils, and thoughts profound. But ripeness for large reflecting gathering up of these, as on a lonely slope whence men look back down towards the cities and the human fields where they too worked and laughed and loved. Next, age, wonderful age with those approaching skies. That boon wilt thou renounce? Wherefore? To bring for a few years, how miserably few, her sonward who must after all return? Ah, son of rishis, cease. Lo, I remit help's grasp, not oft relinquished, and send back thy beautiful life unborrowed to the stars. O thou must render to the immutable total all thy fruit-bearing years, then she re-blossoms. But the shadow antagonist, let him be shown the glory he would renounce. And over the flaming pediment there moved as on a frieze a march of sculptures, carved by Phidias for the virgin strong and pure, most perfect ones of all things seen on earth or heaven, in Athens, on the Acropolis, but now dismembered, now disrupt. Or, as in Buddhist cavern or Orishan temple, large aspirations architectural, warrior and dancing girl, adept and king, and conquering pomps and daily peaceful groups dream delicately on, softening with beauty, great Bhuvaneshwar, the Almighty's house, with sculptural suggestions so well limned, scenes future on a pediment of fire. There Ruru saw himself, divine with age, a rishi to whom infinity is close, rejoicing in some green, song-haunted glade or boundless mountain top, where most we feel whiteness, not by small happy things disturbed around him, as around an ancient tree, its seedlings, forms august or flame like rose. They grew beneath his hands and were his work. Great kings were there, whom time remembers, fertile deep minds and poets with their chanting lips, whose words were seed of vast philosophies. These worshipped. Above this earth's half day, he saw amazed the dawn of that mysterious face, and all the universe in beauty merge. Mad the boy thrilled upwards, then spent, ebbed back. Over his mind as birds across the sky sweep and are gone, the vision of those fields and drooping faces came. Almost he heard the burdened river with human anguish wail. Then, with a sudden fury gathering his soul, he hurled out of it half its life and fell like lightning prone. Triumphant rose the shadow chill and deepened giant night. Only the dais flickered in the gloom, and those snake eyes of cruel fire subdued. But suddenly, a bloom, a fragrance, hell shuddered with a bliss. Resentful, overborne, the world besetting terror faded back like one grown weak by desperate victory. And a voice cried in Ruru's tired soul, "Arise, the strife is over. Easy now the horror thou hast to face, the burden now shared." And with a sudden burst like spring, life woke in the strong lover overtired. He rose and left dim death. 12 times he crossed Boitorini, the river dolorous. 12 times resisted hell and hurried down into the ominous pit where plunges black the vast stream thundering. Saw, led puissantly from night to unimaginable night, as men oppressed in dreams who cannot wake but measure penal visions, punishments whose sight pollutes, unheard of tortures, pangs monstrous, intolerable mute agonies, twisted, unmoving attitudes of pain like thoughts inhuman in statuary. A fierce and iron voicelessness had grasped those worlds. No horror of cries expressed their endless woe, no saving struggle, no breathings of the soul, and in the last hell, irremediable, where Ganges clots into that fatal pool, appalled, he saw her. Pallid, listless, bare, oh, other than that earthly warmth and grace in which the happy roses deepened and dimmed with come and go of swift enamored blood. Dumb drooped she. Round her shapes of anger armed stood dark like thunderclouds. But Ruru sprang upon them, burning with the admitted God. They from his touch like ineffectual fears vanished. Then, soul with her, trembling he cried the old glad name, and crying bent to her and touched, and at the touch the silent knots of hell were broken, and its somber dream of dreadful stately pains at once dispersed. Then, as from one whom a surpassing joy has conquered, all the bright surrounding world streams swiftly into distance, and he feels his daily senses slipping from his grasp. So that unbearable enormous world went rolling mighty shades, like the wet mist from men on mountain tops, and sleep outstretched, rising its soft arms towards him, and his thoughts, as on a bed, sank to ascending void. But when he woke, he heard the coil insist on sweetness, and the voice of happy things content with sunlight. The warm sense was round him of old essential earth, known hues and custom familiar, tranquilizing body and mind, as in its natural wave a lotus feels. He looked and saw all grass and dense green trees and sunshine, and a single grasshopper near him repeated fierily its note. Thrilling, he felt beneath his bosom her. Oh, warm and breathing were those rescued limbs, against the greenness, vivid, palpable, white, with great black hair, and real, and her cheeks all softness, and her mouth a dewy rose. For many moments, comforting his soul with all her jasmine body sun ensnared, he fed his longing eyes, and half in doubt, with touches satisfied himself of her. Hesitating, he kissed her eyelids. Sighing, with a slight sob she woke, and earthly large her eyes looked upward into his. She stretched her arms up, yearning, and their souls embraced. Then, twixt brief sobbing laughter and blissful tears, clinging with all her limbs to him, O love, the green, green world, the warm sunlight, and ceased, finding no words. But the earth breathed round them, glad of her children, and the koel's voice persisted in the morning of the world.